Hi, and welcome back to Glassboxed, writing automated cucumber tests. Today we're going to have a look at scenario outline data tables. We will look at what a scenario outline data table is, where and why you would use scenario outline data tables, and how to use a scenario outline data table. So first things first, what is a scenario outline data table? Well, similar to data tables as described in my previous video, where we pass in an array of information as part of a single step, a scenario outline data table is where we run the same scenario for each given row we have in this scenario outline data table. Using scenario outline data table can help us to run the same scenario using multiple types of data, or rather multiple variations of data. So now that we know a little more about scenario outline data tables, why and in what sort of situations would you use a scenario outline data table? Well, like I said, when scenarios don't change, but only the data changes, this is a prime example. Let's look at a user flow scenario on our zoo site. So here, I've got various links, and let's just say we just want to write a test where we click on adoption, and all we want to do as part of the test is check that we are on the adoption page. And we want to do the same thing with the about, so check we're on the about page when we click on about, and when we click on contact we want to check we're on contact, and that's it. Nothing more complicated than that. I want to write a test that does that, so if I go back to Eclipse, I've already written a test that does exactly that. So here we have three different scenarios. The first one opens the zoo site, clicks on the adoption link, checks that it's on the adoption page, and then closes the browser. And the same steps are repeated for the about and contact page. The step definitions, again, a step definition has been written for each given step because all the steps, although they're similar, they're different. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to run this feature file really quickly just to prove that three web browsers open up one after the other where we run our specified tests. So I'm just going to right click, run as, run feature. So looking at our results, we had three scenarios and a total of 12 steps, and everything passed. So that's correct. That's exactly what we're looking for. And if you look at our step definitions, we've got many step definitions. Some are obviously being used more than once, such as given, I am on the zoo site, and close the browser. But the other steps are being used only the once by each of the given steps in the feature file. So this is a prime example where we can use scenario outline data tables and replace some of the information, such as click on adoption and check your adoption page, for instance. Now, a lot of people might be saying, you know, I don't even know what data tables are, but what's the point using this scenario outline data table? Why not just use a parameter? It probably achieve the same thing, and you can do exactly what it is that you're trying to do at the moment. And that's true. I can use parameters. I can kind of do this, if you like. Take this approach, which clearly says this is a parameter, this is a parameter. But data tables, particularly scenario outline data tables, do have their advantages, and we'll look into that. So the first thing I'm going to do is just copy this, and I'm going to create a scenario outline. And the way to do this is when we say scenario, instead of saying scenario, we now say a scenario outline. What this is saying is, what this is doing is it's identifying this scenario to be used alongside an examples data table. And it's also saying that this scenario can run multiple times based on the amount of information we provide. And to provide a data table for a scenario outline, as opposed to data table, which we do for the given step. For example, if we did here, then we would define the table here. For instance, if it was a data table. For scenario outline data tables, the way we do it is here. We do it at the bottom of every step, or if you like, after the last step. And the way we do is we give an example, colon, and then we give our data here. So we have two forms of data that we want to pass. We have a click on some link, and we have a check page title. So we have two columns of data, if you like. So the first column I will name link, and the second column I will name title. And now I can pass in the necessary information. So the first link I want to click on is the adoption. So I'll say adoption. And the title that I want to check on the page is also adoption. The second is about. And the same. And the last is contact. Now, before I go any forward, this data will be passed in as a parameter. But as you may have noticed already from our previous videos, if we want to look at the information we want to click on, and we go to view page source, the links all have IDs and names and hyperlink reference attributes. And the ones I'm interested in is the IDs. So adoption has an adoption underscore link, about has an about underscore link, and contact has a contact underscore link. So I'm going to use that information, and that's what I'm going to pass in as part of this scenario outline data table. So adoption would be adoption underscore link, about will be underscore link underscore link. Now, how do you actually use this information in your scenario? Well, where we identified parameters is in double quotes. When you want to use a scenario outline data table, you identified it using arrow brackets. So the way we do it is like so. And then inside this arrow brackets, you give the name of the column you want to use. So here I want to use link, and here I want to use title. So now what's going to happen is when I run this scenario, and keep in mind we haven't done the step definition side of this yet, we will do, but when I run this scenario, it's going to basically first run this scenario for this row, where it's going to substitute the value of link with adoption underscore link and title for adoption. Once it gets here to the end of the last step, it's going to rerun this same scenario, but this time incrementing the row count by 1. So it's going to run the next row, this time substituting link for about underscore link and title for about. And again, when it gets to the end, it's gonna then rerun the same scenario again for the next row, and so on. So let's just quickly run the pretty format on this. Okay, so this scenario now is doing exactly what these three are doing. So I'm just gonna comment these out really quickly. In case anyone doesn't know, to comment out something in a feature file, you just use the hash symbol. That will comment out any given line you want to comment out. But now this scenario is doing exactly the same as this. So let me explain the advantage of doing this. So when we had parameters, this kind of approach, you still need to write out multiple scenarios. There's no way around it. Even if we want to pass in parameters and we want to check, let's just say 4, 5, 6 different pages, you still have to write out a full scenario. The advantage of using a data table is you just add in the necessary new data. So if I want to use a different one, for example, home underscore link, all I do is just say well, just add in the necessary information. That's it. That's quite quite literally all I have to do. I do not have to rewrite a scenario from scratch and replace the values of the parameters. I just add another row to the table, and that automatically, from an abstract perspective, if you like, implicitly reruns the same scenario, substituting the necessary places for the data that I've provided. So I hope that makes sense. Now I'm going to move on to the step definitions, and I'm going to implement the steps. So before I do that, I know that the given I'm on the zoo site and the close the browser steps are all used in every scenario. But the others, to be more specific, when I click on contact step, for instance, or when I click on the adoption step, or when I check I'm on the about page, they are all unique to a given step. So I'm going to get rid of all the step definitions for those. So I'm going to keep this. This I'm going to get rid of. In fact, let's be a little bit more clever about this. I don't need this, I don't need that, I don't need that, or that. Right, so let's close this. Okay, so now I only have the two steps, the given I'm on the zoo and the closed browser. So now we need to implement the steps for these two, and luckily on the other end, writing the steps for those is very similar to writing a step as if we were just passing in a parameter. So I'm just going to copy these two here. The reason why I copied this is because one is looking to click on a link, while the other is looking to check on a page. And I'm just going to remove this and add in the necessary formatting needed to be able to pick up those parameters we're going to pass in. And the way you do it is, again, similar to parameters. It's just a regex pattern. Right. And this is the regex pattern that effectively says allow any chronological order of characters or numbers or spaces to be inputted as part of this when method. And I'm going to copy the same thing in here. Again, we're passing in some parameter, so we need to declare it. So string, so this was a link. I'm just going to say link here, and this is a string title, and I'm just going to say title here. Right, and that now should be it. So let me explain. So again, this is very similar to how we would pass in a traditional parameter, like this, where we identify a parameter using double quotation marks. And nothing's really changed. We do the same thing when we try and capture that information in our method, and again when we try and pass it in. So on the step definition side, there really is no big change compared to how we pass in information if it were a parameter or if it were part of a scenario outline data table. So what we're going to do now is we're just going to right click and run this and see what happens. And what should happen is this same scenario should now run 4 times, but we've only declared the scenario once, but we have declared 4 different additional rows under the column headings. So let's run this and see what happens. So the first browser is opened up, it's gone to adoption and closed. The second, and this is going to go to about. The third, this should go to contact, and it does go in order that we define the information. And the last one should just click on itself effectively on the home link. And there you go. So what's happened? Well, as you can see, what it did was when it ran, so these are just the comments, and by default all comments are printed when we run a feature file. So just ignore all of this for now. But when it ran as our console output result, it basically said this is the scenario it's trying to run, and this is the field where it's trying to replace the value with whatever it is that we provide. And then it ran all the examples, i.e. all the row data. So when it ran the first row here, it basically replaced this link and this title with adoption underscore link and adoption. And the same approach was taken for about, contact, and home. At the bottom, notice that even though we've declared one scenario, it's actually run 4 scenarios because there are 4 sets of data in the data table, and in total there are 16 steps, i.e. 4 steps times by 4 rows, which equates to 16 steps. And that's how we use scenario outline data tables. So I hope through this video you've kind of understood the difference between using a parameter and using a data table. And note, a difference is that when we use scenario outline data tables, we have to define the scenario as a scenario outline. This effectively tells Cucumber that this scenario is designed to run multiple times based on the number of rows we provided in the examples data table, which should be available after the very last step in that given scenario. And that's it for this video, folks. If you enjoy my video and find they bring some new knowledge or insight into writing Cucumber tests, then please subscribe and rate and comment. If you have any questions or video suggestions, then please leave a comment below. Many thanks for watching. Until next time, ciao.